Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on designing better spreadsheets in Excel. I hope everyone is surviving okay with all the craziness that's going on right now. It's definitely a difficult time for everyone, so I hope you are all doing well wherever you are joining us from around the world today. And I guess one of the advantages of webinars like this one is that none of us need to leave our houses. So hopefully this will provide a little bit of a distraction for us for an hour or so. Now, we do run these webinars regularly, but I'm always aware that we might have some new people on the call with us today. So I'll just briefly introduce myself. So my name's Deborah Ashby, and I'm a Microsoft IT trainer specializing in the design, delivery, and facilitation of Microsoft courses and training, both online and in the classroom. And I've been using, supporting and training Excel and all of the other Microsoft products for about 25 years now. It makes me feel extremely old when I say that. And really, my only aim with these short webinars is to show you some things you didn't know and also get you thinking about Excel in a different way. So with all that in mind, let me pull up the agenda for today and show you what we're going to be covering. Now, I know the title of this webinar, Designing Better Spreadsheets, it doesn't really tell you much. It's quite a broad catch-all kind of a title. But we are going to go into a lot of different things today. Some things you may know, some things you're probably not going to be as familiar with. But the general kind of idea is to make it so that your spreadsheets are really usable for anybody that you send them to, and also so that we can cut down the amount of errors that are being produced in our spreadsheets. So I'm just going to start out by talking to you a little bit about why it's important to design your spreadsheets. I'm then just going to go through some tips that I have, some golden rules when it comes to designing or setting up spreadsheets. We're going to talk about the layout and the structure of your workbooks, and I'm going to show you how you can utilize something called summary sheets. I'm also going to do a recap on absolute referencing because that's a really important thing when it comes to cutting down on errors and the amount of things you're having to change in a spreadsheet. And we're also going to look at how we can use cell styles and formatting to make our spreadsheets really easy to understand. I'm then going to show you how you can do things like add controls into your spreadsheet using things like data validation. I'm going to show you how you can protect your worksheets and possibly protect just certain parts of worksheets, again, to control the information that's going into your spreadsheet. And then finally, I'm going to speak to you about version control. Now, quite a lot that we're covering in there, and we're going to go through all of this at a reasonable pace. Now, just to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and we will make that recording available to you after the fact. And I do have the lovely Mr. Adam Lacey on the call with me today. I don't know if he wants to say hello or if he's gone on to mute, but we have Adam with us today.
Hello, everybody. Just came off mute. Yeah, how you doing? If you're having any issues seeing or anything like that, just log on and log log off and log back on again. I noticed there's one person with a problem, I think, but I'll chat to them in the chat panel. Any questions? Just drop them into there, and I will try and answer them. And if not, we'll save them for the end for Debs.
Wonderful, thank you, Adam. All right, so let's start out by just discussing this first point. So why it's important to design your spreadsheets. Now, I think when we're using Excel, there tends to be this tendency, and this is a tendency you find in everybody, to just open a new blank worksheet and kind of dive in and start inputting your data into cells, or maybe importing your data from an external source without too much thought as to the design and the usability of the workbook that you're creating. Because in our minds, as long as the data is there and we understand it, then that's all that matters, right? Well, not really. These days, we rarely create workbooks that are solely used by ourselves. More often than not, we share workbooks with other people, with colleagues, with external clients, and we might have multiple people in a spreadsheet updating data. So it's really, really important that you think about this when you're putting together a spreadsheet. And the reason why, I'm sure we have all had this experience where we've spent quite a bit of time putting together a spreadsheet. We might have calculations in that spreadsheet, and it might be quite complex. And when we finished it, we're really proud of the work that we've done and how everything calculates correctly. We've then sent that spreadsheet to someone else, and within 10 minutes, they've managed to mess up all of the work that you've done. Now, that might be either through that person's lack of Excel knowledge. They might not really understand what they're doing. It might be that they are confused about which parts of the spreadsheet they're supposed to be editing and which parts they're supposed to be leaving alone. Or it could just be a genuine accident. Again, it's pretty easy to be in a cell, hit the wrong button, and before you know it, you've broken a formula and a calculation is no longer working. And you then have to spend time trying to figure out what's gone wrong with that spreadsheet. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to really cut down on the amount of errors going into your spreadsheet and just make it super simple for everybody to understand what they're supposed to be doing when they open your spreadsheet. So a big part of designing better spreadsheets is to make sure that everything is organized, it's easy to understand for everyone, it has clear instructions, and it cuts down on errors by limiting the cells that others can change. Okay, so that's why it's important to design your spreadsheets and think about it when you're doing it. So what we're going to look at first, I'm just going to go through some tips for designing spreadsheets. Now, I'm going to go through each of these points. Now, in a moment, we're going to demo all of these points in Excel, so you can see exactly what I mean from each of these points. So the first thing I would say is organize your data. So have your input, your calculations, and your output all on separate tabs. So what do I mean by that? Well, your input might be your raw data, the data that you're starting with, sales data or whatever it might be, have all that on one tab. If you're doing any calculations, have that on a separate calculations tab. And then if you have any output, so maybe you've decided to create a chart based on that data or some kind of pivot table, have those on a separate sheet as well. So keep everything in separate tabs. Create a summary sheet with instructions. And again, I'm going to show you how this works. This is something that I very rarely see people do, but it's so helpful. It just sets out how the spreadsheet is to be used. And again, really helps people who are looking at a spreadsheet that they aren't used to seeing. Color code tabs that are related. This is a really simple thing, making sure that if you have lots of tabs in your workbook and some of those tabs are related, that you color them all the same color. So there is a visual representation there of, okay, these worksheets are kind of the same type. They belong to the same subject matter. Use formatting in your workbooks to clearly indicate input and calculation cells. So again, this is really just helping guide people to the areas of the worksheet that they're supposed to be editing and the areas that they're supposed to be leaving alone. Use absolute referencing to cut down on formula errors. Now, if I'm always surprised by people who have never heard of absolute referencing or don't know how to use it. I will show you how to use it if you're not sure. But absolute referencing is great because it really helps you cut down on if you need to change a figure in your spreadsheet. You can change it in one place as opposed to multiple other places. So you're really, again, helping to cut down on the possible errors that might be going into that spreadsheet. Controlling inputs. Again, if you really want to direct people and you don't want them touching things they're not supposed to be touching, changing calculations, you can do things like use data validation to control what's going into your spreadsheet. And you can also protect parts of the workbook that you don't want them to change. And then finally, I would always advise this to create a versions tab where you log all of the changes that you've made to the workbook. Now, all of these things we're going to go through in a demo form so you can see exactly what I mean. So let's start out with that first one, organizing our data. So I'm just going to jump across to Excel. So just bear with me one moment. All right, hopefully everybody can see that Excel spreadsheet on the screen. I'm hoping there's no lag. Please do let me know, Adam, if anybody complains of there being a lag, and I will go a bit slower. All right, so I have numerous different tabs at the bottom of this workbook, and I'm currently clicked on this data tab. Now, the information held in this data tab, this is some raw data. This is sales data for 2 different stores in the UK. So I have month, store, town, store code, and various other pieces of information. And I have the sales in column H. Now, this is quite a long set of data. If I jump down to the bottom, and to jump down to the bottom of a data set, if you press Control down arrow, it's going to jump you to the last row. You can see it's got 21,574 rows of data. Control up arrow to jump to the top. Now, the first thing I would do, and again, this helps when it comes to designing your spreadsheets, is if you have raw data, always put it into a table. Now, I've already done that with this data, but if you're not sure how to do that, all you need to do is highlight all of your data. So click somewhere in your data, press Control A to highlight everything. And then on the home ribbon, you have a Format as Table drop down. And you can select any one of those styles, and essentially it will put all of your raw data into a table. And you'll know that it's in a table because then when you're clicked in it, if you look up, you'll have this Table Tools Design ribbon, which basically gives you all of the different things that you can do with this table. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, why on earth would I put it into a table? Why is that going to help me? Well, let me show you. I would always suggest as well, once you've put your data into a table, that you give your table a name. And you'll see the first group here is properties. And in table name, I've named this table sales data. Okay, so give your table a name just by typing it into here and pressing enter. So my entire table now has a name, sales data. And I have 2 other spreadsheets which use this table data in the calculations. So if I jump across to calculations, you can see here I have 3 pivot tables that I've created from this data. And I've put them on a separate calculations tab. I've also got a dashboard just here using that same sales data. And this is more of a graphical representation of those calculations that I have on this tab. So you can see on the dashboard, I have my sales by category, sales by town, sales by manager, and I have some slices running down the side, which are interactive. So if I just want to see this data for the store Computech, I can select it in the slicer and everything is going to update. So this is a dashboard. I'm not going to go too much into how you create these. If you are interested in learning all about how to create interactive dashboards like this, I do believe we have a webinar online. Adam can correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but I do believe that we have a webinar on designing interactive dashboards that you can check out on our YouTube channel.
We do, correct, yeah.
Yes, and I think that's quite a nice little webinar, so definitely check that one out.
I'll try and find the link and drop it into the chat.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, so saying that, these 3 tabs are essentially connected. They're of the same type. These 2 tabs are utilizing the information on this data tab. Now, the reason why I would say put things in a table is because, again, for ease of use, and I'm going to show you what I mean. Let's jump down to the last row, Control down arrow. I'm going to add another row into the bottom of this table. And for quickness, I'm just literally going to copy the information above. Now, because my information is in a table, as soon as I add a new row, it becomes part of that sales data table automatically. So I'm just going to add pretty much the same information, but I am going to make the sales data, I'm going to make this pretty extreme so it's easy to see. We're going to say 1 million in here. Now, because I've put this in a table, if I go back to my dashboard, if I want that to update, instead of going in and having to change everything individually, if you look at the sales by manager down here, all I need to do is go up to my analyze, refresh all, and you'll see that that total has now updated. So what I'm saying here is that if you need to add additional figures into the bottom, if you've got it in a table, it will expand, and then all you have to do to update any charts or tables hanging off of it is just press that refresh button. So again, by doing that, you're cutting down on the amount of mistakes going into your spreadsheet. So The takeaway here is separate your data and name your tables and your ranges. The final thing I'm going to do here is, because these three tabs are related, I'm going to color code them all so they're the same color. So I'm going to select the data tab. I'm going to hold down my control key, click on calculations and click on dashboard. I'm going to right click my mouse and I'm going to select tab color, and we're going to change them to red. So straight away I can see here, because they're all colored red, those are all related. Okay, so just think about the structure and how you're going to color code things and how you're going to organize your data. The next tip I would say would be to create something called a summary sheet. And you'll see that I have a summary sheet right at the start of this workbook. And I always tend to put my summary sheet right at the beginning. It's the first thing I want people to look at. Now, a summary sheet, if you've never seen one or used one before, is really just a set of instructions. So if I'm sharing this workbook with other people, this summary sheet tells them what I want them to do with this workbook. It doesn't leave any room for interpretation. So you could probably do this in a lot more detail than I've done here. This is just a very, very quick example. But just to show you the kinds of things you might want to put on here, I'm going through and telling them for each of the tabs what each of the tabs means or what they need to do. So you can see on the data tab, I'm saying copy and paste the figures into sales data table monthly and then refresh all the pivot tables. So someone looking at this will say, okay, I have this month's sales figures. I need to go to the data tab. I need to copy and paste the new figures into the bottom. Then I need to go to the dashboard and I need to refresh it so that those sales figures update. Okay, instruction. Calculations, it's saying perform any calculations on this tab. Dashboard, refresh it monthly. Slices can be used to filter your data. And then I also have a note in here about the versions tab saying update after any changes made to this spreadsheet. Include your initials, date, and details of the change. Now, I've only done it for 4 of my tabs, but you could go through and list out every single worksheet that you have and exactly how you want that to be used. So it gives them some guidance. What I also like to have in this initial summary sheet is I like to explain any color coding that I've used. So if I've used specific colors to highlight certain things within my spreadsheet, I like to have a little key down here. So you can see anything that's formatted like this is a heading, anything like that is a warning. Those are input cells, these are calculation cells. So this is kind of like a key for the rest of the document. So this is helpful because if somebody comes to this document and they think, okay, so anything orange is an input cell. So I'm supposed to input something into these cells. Okay, again, just helping people out. I then have some information about where to save this document. And I also have some information about versions, again, saying update the versions tab whenever a change is made. And you can go into as much detail as you like in this summary spreadsheet. Again, the idea is just to make it really simple and save you a lot of headaches. Now, you might be looking at this thinking, well, this seems like a lot of admin to be doing for every worksheet. Now, granted, it is. And you might think, I don't want to do that. Every time I create a spreadsheet that I might share, I don't want to do all of this. And you don't have to do it, but I will say that if you are sharing that, you're probably going to save yourself a lot of headaches from fixing problems, issues, answering questions, if you have this at the start of your spreadsheet. Okay, so I always think, 20 minutes of pain, and then you're saving yourself a lot of time further down the track. All right, so that's the summary sheet. Let's move on now to this VAT rate spreadsheet, because we're going to start to talk about cell styles and absolute referencing. Now, I never like to assume people know what I'm talking about when I say absolute referencing. It is probably one of the first things that you would learn in Excel once you start doing formulas, but I am always surprised how many people don't know about absolute referencing. So if you do, I apologize. The next couple of minutes might be slightly boring for you, but if you don't, let me just explain, and also in the process explain why I like to use absolute referencing in my spreadsheets. So we have a very simple data set here. We have some invoice numbers, we have some customers, we have their company, we have the invoice amount, and we need to complete the VAT and the total columns. And you can see at the top here, we have the VAT rate, which is 20%. So I need to do a calculation in here that's going to tell me what the VAT amount is. So I could say equals, I'm going to say invoice amount multiplied by, now I'm just going to type in 20%, like so. Press enter. It gives me the correct answer. Now I can drag this formula down. So by hovering over in the corner until I get that little cross, if I double click, that's going to copy that formula down. And this formula works. It's giving me the correct answer. But what I've done here is I've hard coded that number into this formula, 20%. So what if that VAT amount changes? What if next month it's 25%? I'm going to have to go in, or whoever's amending this spreadsheet is going to have to go in. They're going to have to change it within the formula. They're then going to have to copy it down. Now you might think, well, that's fine. It's not too much work. And that is true. But what if this spreadsheet is with somebody who doesn't know how to do that? What if somebody doesn't realize that you have to go in, change it in here? Maybe they don't even know how to copy formulas down quickly. Imagine if you have 200, 300 rows of data and the person you've asked to update the VAT amount doesn't realize that you can copy down, and so they spend 2 hours going into each cell individually and changing it to 25%. That's a complete waste of time for everybody. And again, it's just down to a lack of Excel knowledge. So why don't we make their lives a lot easier? Let's delete this out. Let's do this calculation again. Equals invoice amount multiplied by VAT rate. So this time we're not hard coding the number, we're using the cell reference. Now if I just leave it like that and hit enter, and then I drag this formula down by double clicking, I'm going to get some errors here. Now I have those errors because by default Excel uses relative referencing. So this first one is correct, D6 multiplied by B1, we can see what it's doing there. But because I've dragged this formula down, Excel assumes it wants to change, Excel it assumes that I want it to modify the cell references as I drag down. So if I double click on this one, you can see it's doing D7, which is fine, multiplied by B2, but B2 is a blank cell. The next one, D8, which is fine, multiplied by B3, because it's, as I'm dragging down, it's moving the cell references down. So this is where we would use absolute referencing. So let's do it again. Equals invoice amount multiplied by B1. But this time we want to tell Excel, always use cell B1, and that is absolute referencing or fixed referencing. And the quick way of fixing a reference is to press the F4 key. And you can see now it's put those dollar signs in front of the row and the column, which essentially fixes it. So now when I copy down, I get the correct answer, and every single formula is referring to cell B1. Now, the reason why I like to use that, particularly in this session for designing better spreadsheets, is that it makes it so much easier for people to update. So now if you give this spreadsheet to Sally and you ask her to update the VAT, so maybe the VAT rate has changed to 25%, she doesn't have to start messing around with any formulas where she could, maybe mess something up. All she needs to do is go to the VAT rate, change it to 25%, and it changes everywhere. So making sure you use absolute referencing really helps to cut down on the amount of errors and the amount that people are having to play around with these formulas. I can then do a very simple calculation for the total. We're doing invoice amount plus VAT amount, enter. This one we don't need to make absolute because we're happy for it to copy down each time. And there we have our totals. I'm going to take this a stage further now. If I want to make this even clearer as to what cells can be input cells and which cells are calculation cells, I can use something called cell styles. And you have cell styles built into Excel. So looking at my data here, the data that's going to be changed by somebody else might be the invoice number. So when a new invoice comes in, they're probably going to enter a new invoice number, new customer, company, and they'll enter in the invoice amount. So what I might want to do here is I might want to say that these, I'm going to drag this down a little bit further, are input cells. So on the home ribbon, we have a cell styles option. And this is just formatting, okay? Now, you don't necessarily have to use cell styles. I just find that they're set up, they're a little bit easier to use. So I'm going to say that these are input cells. Now, these have their own formatting, and that's quite small, so I'm just going to make that font a little bit bigger again. But it denotes them as input cells. I'm going to say that the VAT rate is also an input cell because that could change. So I'm going to go back to cell styles, input cell, and again, I'm just going to put that up. And I'm going to say that the VAT amount and the total, and I'm just going to drag this a bit further down as well to account for anything else that we're adding in. These are going to be calculation cells. So again, just to make them look different, I'm going to go to cell styles and I'm going to say that they're calculation cells. Like so. Okay, so just with a little bit of formatting, I can see input cells versus calculation cells. And if you remember back on our summary sheet, I have that there. Input cell is in orange, calculation cell is gray with orange font. So it makes it easier for people to see, okay, I need to input into here. Okay, so think about using color coding to guide people towards where they're supposed to enter information. Now, you could take this to a completely new level. What you could do is you could actually lock the cells that you don't want them to change. So it might be that I want to completely lock these calculation cells so that people can't type in them at all. They can only type in these orange input cells. Now, when it comes to locking cells, this is something that I find really confuses people. And I do admit it is confusing, it is slightly backwards. When you're locking certain parts of worksheets, the thing you have to remember in Excel is that by default, every single cell in Excel is locked. Now, you might think, how can that be? Because I can click anywhere in this spreadsheet and I can enter in information. If the cell is locked, why can I do that? Well, let me show you. If I right-click on a cell and go to Format Cells and go to the Protection tab, you can see it's telling me the cell is locked. And any cell I clicked on, it would show as locked. The locking doesn't take effect until you protect the worksheet, okay? So you need to remember that concept. Everything is locked, but you can input because you haven't protected the worksheet. So essentially what we want to do here is I want to have these as locked cells, but have these as unlocked cells. So I'm going to select the cells that I don't want to lock. So I'm going to select all of the input cells, so the orange cells. I'm also going to select, by holding down Control, this VAT rate cell. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to go to Format Cells, and I'm going to say Unlock. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to protect the entire worksheet. So we're going to go up to Review, Protect Sheet. Now you don't have to put a password on. I am, in this case. It's going to ask me to enter it again. So now what you'll see is that if I try and make a change to the formulas in VAT amount or total, as soon as I start to type, it's telling me it's protected, so I can't get to those formulas. However, I can come to invoice amount and I can change it. And you'll see it's letting me change those input cells. The calculations are still updating, but the person, whoever's entering this, cannot get in to mess around with those formulas. I can also go to VAT rate, change that to 30%, and you'll see that everything will update. So this is a really nice way of directing people to where they can enter information in and protecting information that you don't want changed. So think about that again when you're designing your spreadsheets. It's really going to cut down on the amount of errors you find in your spreadsheets.
Can I dive in, Debs?
Yeah.
Just in case anyone's wondering what VAT is, I know a lot of people joining us from outside the UK. It stands for value added tax. It's sales tax, basically. So something that you put on an invoice. I'm sure you'd worked that out already, but if you hadn't, that's what VAT is in the UK. And yes, unbelievably, it is 20% on everything, which is horrible. But anyway, back to Debs.
Thank you for that, Adam. Yeah, sorry about that. I forget that we have people from all around the world and some people may not know what VAT is. So thank you for that, Adam. All right. So what I might want to do now is that now that I've made some changes to this spreadsheet, I might want to update my summary sheet. So I might want to go back to my summary sheet, go up to here, and I might want to add something in that says VAT rate. So we're referring to that spreadsheet. Change the VAT rate in cell B1 only. Okay, and just for consistency, let's just make that bold, like so. So again, I'm telling them if you need to change the VAT rate on the VAT rate, only change it in cell B1. You don't need to go into the calculations and change it. So it's just making things super clear for everybody to understand. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone so far. Let's jump across to invoices. Now this is on a similar vein. We're going to do a couple of similar things to what we've just done, but I always think it's worth going over that protection twice because, as I said, people do find that slightly confusing. But we're going to get a little bit fancier here. We're going to do some data validation. Now, let me explain what I mean by data validation. What I have here, again, is just a sample client invoices, and we need to fill out the invoice number, invoice date, client amount, VAT, and total into this spreadsheet. So I'm going to start with just an invoice number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to say invoice date. Let's just say 1st of the 1st, 2020. Now, client. Now, I might type in the name of the client. So we'll say Northwind Traders. Now, if somebody else is adding in the client name, they might come in here and they might type Northwind Traders. They might make a spelling mistake. So as far as Excel is concerned, these are two different clients. And sometimes it's very hard to notice if someone's made a tiny spelling error. And if you're doing any kind of analysis on your data, things like this can really mess up your data. So what you might want to do here to make sure that every single time a client name is put into this spreadsheet, it's the same and it's correct, is you might want to utilize a data validation list. So let me show you what I mean by that. What I like to have is if I'm inputting a list of clients, and this could be something else, it doesn't have to be clients, I will have a separate spreadsheet called clients where I keep a client list. And I'll always keep this client list updated. And if I get new clients, I will add them to the bottom of this list. So what I want to do is in this invoices spreadsheet, I want to have a little drop down which will list out all of the clients in that clients list, and I can just select from the drop down. And again, makes it really easy for anybody to do, and it ensures that you're not getting spelling errors and different things going into your spreadsheet. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We use data validation to create the list, but we're going to do something a little bit fancier. I want to make this data validation list a dynamic data validation list. So what I mean by that is that every time I get a new client and I add new clients onto the bottom here, I want the data validation list to automatically update to include the new clients. Okay, and it isn't obvious how you do this in Excel, which is why I want to show you, because I think it's so useful. So let's jump across to our client list. First thing we need to do is we need to select all of our client lists, Control A, and we need to put it into a table. Remember at the beginning I said tables are useful for many reasons. So I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Format as Table, and I'm just going to select, you can select any one of these. It's going to say, where is your data? And I can see it's selected my data range. My table does have headers. Okay. So my data is now in a table. Now, the second thing I need to do here, and this is what confuses people, is I need to name this range. So actually, let me just name this table first of all. So on our Table Tools design ribbon, we have table name. I'm going to name this client list and hit enter. Now, my table only has one column. You may have other information about your clients in a table, so you may have multiple different columns. So the next thing you really need to do is you need to specify which data in your table you want to include in your data validation dropdown. So for me, it's going to be this data just here, but if you have a much larger table, it could be a column that you have over here, it could be a column just here. Okay, so whatever you want to be in your data validation list, highlight it. So just going to highlight. Now I'm not highlighting the title client list because I don't want that to appear in my data validation dropdown. Now, once I've highlighted this list, I'm going to name the range. Okay, so we've already named the table. I'm now naming this range of cells. And we name a range of cells just by clicking in this name box. So I'm going to go up to here and I'm just going to say, let's say companies, like that. Hit enter. That step is really important in order for this data validation to work. Let's jump back to invoices, and we're now going to create our data validation drop-down list. I'm going to go up to data. I'm going to go to this data tools area, and this little button just here is my data validation button. I'm going to click the drop-down, select data validation. And what we're doing is we are creating a drop-down list. So I'm going to select list for my validation criteria. It's now saying, okay, what's the source? What do you want me to include in this list? So I want to pull through that range of cells that I named. So I'm going to say equals, and then a quick little tip for pulling up any ranges that you have in your spreadsheet is to press the F3 key. So you can see I have a few different ranges in this workbook, but the top one there is companies, which is the range I want to use. Like so. Click on OK. You can now see that I have a drop-down arrow just here, and it's listing out all of the companies from that list. Now, if I want to utilize this in each cell, I can drag it down for as far as I want to go, so that every cell I click in is going to have this data validation drop down. So I could go in, select a company. I know it's going to be correct every time I input it into the cell. Now let's take a look at the dynamic part in action. So if we look at our list so far, it ends at company H. And if I jump back to our clients list, company H is the last one. What if I add a new company into the bottom here? So if I just click in cell A10 and let's add company X, hit enter. Because I put this in a table, the table automatically expands to accommodate the new company. If I go back to my invoices dropdown, you'll see company X has automatically been added to the bottom of that list. Okay, so it's a really efficient, dynamic way of keeping one centralized list and having it update in your data validation. So now every time somebody enters in a company, it's going to be exactly the same every single time. You're cutting down on errors. Okay, there's lots of little things that you can do using data validation in your spreadsheets. That's just one example. Let's go through and complete some other details. So I'm going to say the amount of this invoice is 500. We need to work out the VAT again. So I'm going to say equals 500 multiplied by, we're going to use our cell reference and we're going to make it absolute, F4. Enter. We're going to do our basic total calculation, D4 plus D4 to get our total. And again, if you're going to be completing lots of invoices, you can copy these formulas down as far as you want to go. Oops, sorry, don't want to do that. I'm going to leave that as it is. I don't want to do that because it's just going to put 500 in there. Okay, so we have our first line complete. Now, again, what I might want to do is I might want to lock certain parts of this spreadsheet. So again, this is what we did previously. I'm going to show you it again because it's really important. You're going to select the cells and apply formatting so people know which cells are input cells and which cells are calculation cells. So I'm going to say that these are all input cells. So we're going to go to Home, Cell Styles, Input Cells. And these ones are calculation cells. And we're going to select calculation. Now it's worth noting in here, if you don't like the way that these look, you can create your own cell styles if you want to. Now that's an entirely different thing which we could cover in a different webinar, but you can create your own cell styles if you don't particularly like the formatting of these standard ones. All right. But again, because we have on that summary sheet a key that's saying input calculation, it makes it really easy for people to understand where they need to enter different things. I'm going to change that VAT to an input cell as well. And then again, of course, we could go through and we could lock different parts of this spreadsheet. So I want people to be able to enter into these cells, hold down Control, and I want them to be able to change the VAT rate. So I'm going to unlock these cells. Format cells, take the check out of the box. And then I need to protect the worksheet. So go to Review, Protect Sheet. And there we go. So again, if I was to try and go in and modify these formulas, it's not going to work, but I can still input things into these calculation cells, and I can use my data validation and whatever else I need to do. Okay, so really, really simple to do things like that. Hopefully that makes sense. And you're getting an idea as to how you can really kind of shepherd people towards the areas of the spreadsheet you want them to work in, and also protect the areas that you don't want them to touch. It's going to save you so many headaches going forward. Now the final, actually, before we move on to the final thing, because invoices and clients are also related, I'm going to do exactly the same thing and color code these tabs. So I'm going to hold down Control, select invoices and clients, right click and change the tab color so that they're both the same. The final tab we have here is a versions tab. And again, this is a little bit admin-y, but something that's well worth doing. I would always have at the end of a spreadsheet a version tab to keep track of any changes that have been made. And again, you can kind of set this up however you want. I've just done a very basic example. But you can see here I have version numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the date, a description of the change that was made to the workbook, and who made that particular change. So I might want to jump in here and just say, okay, so number 6, let's say what's today's date? So the 16th of April 20, I keep thinking it's 2019 still, 2020. And then I might want to say that I have, what have we done? Updated, oops, added a new client to clients worksheet. And then I'm going to add my name. And again, with this, you could have data validation lists. If you don't want to keep typing in the same names each time, you could set up a different tab. You could have the name of all the people in your company. You could create a data validation list so that people can just select the name from a drop down. Now it looks like I need to apply some formatting to this one just here. Not quite sure what's going on there. There we go. Okay. All right, so we're just keeping track of all of the changes that we're making. Something else you might want to have are links. So you can see here I've had little links area. I have links to, or clickable links to, all of the different worksheets. So this makes it easy to navigate around. So if I want to quickly jump to the data worksheet, I can click on the data worksheet link and it's going to take me there. Okay, so really useful for navigation, particularly if you have a large or a lot of different worksheets. Now, I'll just show you very briefly how you can create links to different worksheets so you can bounce around and navigate efficiently. It's very simple. For example, if I want to create a link to clients, I'm going to go up to the Insert ribbon. I'm going to go to Link. And you'll see here it says Text to Display. So I'm going to say Clients Worksheet. You can say which cell you want it to jump to. Now, I don't need it to jump to any particular cell, just the worksheet. So I'm going to leave it on A1. But I want this one to jump to clients. And you can see that I'm clicked on place in this document and it's going to show me all of the tabs I have in this current document. And click on OK. And I've created a little link there. If I click it, it's going to jump me to my client's worksheet. I could go further. Let's do another one. I'm going to go up to link again. This one is going to say versions worksheet. Now we're on the versions worksheet. So just to make it a bit different, I'm going to say, when you click it, jump to cell, let's say A20 of the versions worksheet. And I'm going to add a screen tip. So in here, I'm going to add some descriptive text. So I'm going to say, make sure you update the versions worksheet when you make change. Click on OK. Click on OK again. So I have my link. If I hover over the link, you see I get that screen tip. Make sure you update the versions worksheet when you make a change. So we're adding in more instruction in different ways into this worksheet. Now, we're already on the versions worksheet, but what you should see is when I click this, you should see that it will highlight cell A20 because that's what we selected. And there we go, it does. All right, so links are a great way to navigate around your spreadsheets. Now, versions and summary, because they're kind of instructional, I'm going to link these two together as well. So I'm going to select both of them. And I'm going to change the tab color for these, and I'm going to make them yellow, as those are my kind of instructional tabs. VAT rate is more of a random one on its own, so I'm just going to give that the color green. Okay, so using color coding, again, you could tell people on your summary worksheet what you've done, that all the tabs that are the same color are related so that people understand what they're looking at. All right, so hopefully that gives you an idea of some new things that you can do to start designing your spreadsheets in a better way. The final thing I'm going to show you before we finish up with some questions is if we jump to the, where are we, calculations tab just here, you'll notice that I have a button. And if I click this button, it says jump to dashboard. It's going to jump me to that dashboard worksheet. And again, this is just a link. Now, you might want to add these into your spreadsheet to make it really simple for other people entering things onto this spreadsheet. So let me show you an example. In this invoices, if Sally down the corridor is entering in her invoices and she gets to this client's drop down and she's looking through and she thinks, oh, my client that I need isn't listed here. What do I do? She might not know what she needs to do. So what you could do is put a nice button on here that says add new client. So she might think, oh, okay, if I click this button, it's going to help me. So let's put a button on. And for this, all we need to do is, oh, I'm thinking, why is everything grayed out? It's because I protected the worksheet earlier. So I'm going to unprotect the sheet. like so. There we go. I'm going to draw my button. Insert, it's just a shape. I'm going to choose rounded rectangle, and I'm just going to draw out this little button like so. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say edit text, and I'm going to add the text, add new client. Just going to do some formatting to make this look a little bit nicer. So I'm going to want to center that text both vertically and horizontally. And I might want to make this a little bit bigger so it's a bit more obvious. Maybe make it bold. Okay, so there we have a little button. So what I might want to do is link this to the client's worksheet. So it's exactly the same as what we did before. It's just a hyperlink. I'm going to select the button. I'm going to right click this time, and you can see I have a link option just here. Takes us to that same box. So I'm going to make sure I have place in this document selected. I'm going to say clients is the worksheet we want to link to. I'm going to say OK. All right. So now if Sally's working in this spreadsheet and she thinks, oh, my client isn't there, she's going to look across, she's going to see add new client, she can click this button, it's going to jump her to here, and she's going to think, oh, okay, I need to go in here and add my new client onto the bottom, like so. Because we've got that data validation working, it becomes part of the table, she can jump back to invoices, and her new client is automatically updated in the list. Okay, adding all of these things just makes it so much easier for everybody using your spreadsheet. And once you know a few little tips and tricks here and there, it makes your life a lot easier further down the track. All right, that is pretty much everything that I wanted to show you. I just want to finish off by just recapping those takeaways from this session. So the takeaways: separate your data, input, calculations, output, all on different tabs, and color code tabs of similar type or tabs that are related. Name your tables and your ranges. You've seen how that can really help you when it comes to updating. Create a summary sheet at the beginning with detailed instructions on how to use your spreadsheet, what's an input cell, what's not, what the colors mean, how each tab is supposed to be used. Make it easy for people. Use formatting to denote input versus calculation cells. Remember, you can use those inbuilt cell styles, or you can create your own color coding. Protect the cells you don't want to be changed. So if you have loads of formulas and you don't want people touching them, protect those cells. Use things like data validation to control the data going into the spreadsheet. It will cut down on spelling errors, and it will make any analysis you do a lot easier. Add version control to keep track of changes so you can understand the different stages that the worksheet has gone through, and you can see who has made what change in case you need to ask them about it. Use buttons and hyperlinks for easy navigation. Make it easy for people. Add a button that says add new client. Add a button that says jump to this spreadsheet if they need to go there. Okay? Think about your spreadsheets in this way. As I said, I know it seems like it's a lot of admin, but it's really going to save yourself so much hassle further down the track, even for yourself. Some spreadsheets I've created, maybe I don't use them for another 6 months. And then when I come back to them, if I've put no instruction in there whatsoever, I might look at that spreadsheet and think, I don't even know what I was doing. I can't remember from 6 months ago. So for myself, I like to make sure that I have everything in there so I can pick up that spreadsheet and use it straight away. All right. That is pretty much all from me. I'm going to hand over to Adam just to see if there has been any questions as we've been going through. I know it's a lot to take in, but if you do have a question, I will attempt to answer it for you.
Thanks, Debs. Another great webinar. I was just thinking as you were doing that, the majority of problems I've come across in Excel have been due to the people using the program rather than the program itself.
Exactly, yes. you just want to try and like minimize those.
Yeah, and it's the sort of the simplest, some of the simplest things are the most effective, and just being able to lock certain parts of your sheet, color code, give people instructions, just makes the whole, especially where we are today with more and more people collaborating remotely, using spreadsheets in sort of different ways to maybe they were a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Yeah, very important. We've only had one question in actually, so from Jean.
Okay.
Do type in any questions if you have any, guys. And it's a tiny bit off topic, but it's to do with branding standards with presentations and spreadsheets. But I thought you might know the answer. So in a presentation where there are standard spreadsheet settings, can we set this up in Excel, or do we have to do that in PowerPoint? I think Jean means the tables and graphs and things that you'd pull from Excel into PowerPoint. How would you manage that to make sure that there was a standard look and feel? Do you manage it from Excel or from PowerPoint?
So do you mean if you're... I don't really understand what you mean. If you're pulling charts from Excel into PowerPoint,
I believe so. Yeah, Jean, correct us if we're wrong. But yeah, is that what you mean? If you're pulling charts from Excel into PowerPoint, that's what I took the question to mean.
What with regards to like the color of them and things like that?
Yeah, is it best to have a sort of a branding? I guess you could basically have company branding that you set both.
Yeah. So yeah, so obviously the colors that I'm using here, they're all a bit all over the place. So I don't have any particular branding that I'm using, but yes, I do understand. Like a lot of clients have their own branding, their own colors that they use. In some cases with Excel that I've seen at some clients, they kind of have their own theme colors that they use, which match their branding, so that anytime you create a chart in Excel, you're using branded colors, house style, all of those kinds of things. So if you do work in that kind of environment, or you have specific colors that you have to use, I mean, you can use them. It's fine. If you're talking more about, I'm guessing possibly you're talking more about the cell styles and things like that, like these colors.
Yeah, and also does it translate from the theme colors Jean is saying? I think, does it translate from Excel to PowerPoint? And I believe if Office nowadays, if you have the standard kind of look and feel, the brand that you use, it will work across all the different versions, all the different applications.
What you'll normally find, again, if you're working in an organization who does have very strict brand guidelines, if they've got themes set up in Excel, they'll have themes set up in PowerPoint as well. Yeah. So, if I had, like this chart here, and I wanted to put it into PowerPoint, I probably would have already formatted my chart with my brand colors. Then I can copy and I can just paste it into PowerPoint to pull those colors across. Again, I'm assuming that your organization will have, their own themes, but across all of the applications. That's what I think you mean. But for things like these colors here, so the cell styles, as I said, you don't have to use these colors. Again, if you have company colors, company branding, you can create your own cell styles. Now, I didn't cover that today because I thought it was going a bit off topic, but you could, in cell styles, if you don't want to use any of these and you had specific branded colors you wanted to use, you can say new cell style, and you can literally give your style a name, and you can go in and you can format it however you want. So you can pick up your font, your colors, all of that kind of thing.
It's really flexible, isn't it? You can have any
really
sort of color you want, because you can use the RGB codes and everything.
Exactly. So you can set all your settings, then once you click OK, it will then appear at the top here as a custom style, which you could then use. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I think it does. Jean, let us know if it doesn't. I think a couple of cracking questions from Bruce. One of them I don't know the answer to. I wonder if you do, Debs, is how do you handle what happens if you forget your password when you're looking at
Oh, that's a great question, and I do actually know the answer to that.
I don't actually. I was thinking, oh God, I've never come across that.
Yeah, who asked that question? Was it
Bruce?
Bruce. Right, Bruce, I've got some bad news for you. Yes, I have read up about this quite a lot because I've had this question many times in the past. So if you protect your sheet and you enter a password, and then you forget that password, there isn't a great deal you can do about that. It can't be retrieved. Microsoft can't help you in any way, shape, or form. You need to remember that password, basically. Now, you don't have to put a password on. I did, but you don't have to put one on. Okay. So if I was to, let me just protect this sheet again. So if I say protect sheet and I don't fill out a password, I can't actually remember what it does here. Yeah, there we go. So you don't have to put a password on. It just means that if you click unprotect sheet, it's very easy to unprotect it. Okay, you don't have to enter a password. So if you've protected the sheet and you haven't put a password on, and then you send this to somebody else, and they think, oh, I really want to edit that cell, they could just click unprotect sheet. Okay. Whereas if you set a password, they need to enter the password. So if they don't know it, then they're not going to be able to unprotect the sheet. So that's the difference between the two. But yes, if you do forget your password, you are in a bit of trouble. You might have to copy and do some copying and pasting to a different worksheet and create a new workbook, something like that.
I've got around that in the past by just making my Excel passwords Excel, I think, or something like that. You know, something that I can't possibly forget.
Exactly, something, like password. You know, it's not very secure, but it's something. You know.
And another good question from Bruce is: when you lock a tab, does it lock all tabs or the whole worksheet, or do you have to lock each tab separately? I think that's at the top there.
Yeah, so it depends if you're protecting sheet or protecting the entire workbook. So whatever sheet you're clicked on, so invoices here, if I do protect sheet, it's just going to protect the invoices sheet. It's not going to affect VAT or any of the others. But if I wanted to protect every single sheet in my workbook, I would do protect workbook. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah. And then can you do a question from me? Can you do the control select multiple tabs trick and then protect multiple, like 3 of the 8 sheets?
So calculations, hold down control. You can select your different tabs.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, no, you can't. No, you can't. No, you have to.
Sorry,
no, you can't. You'd have to do it
separately.
I thought you could, but no, it doesn't appear that you can. No, I have to do them separately, I'm afraid.
Cool, yeah, and the buttons and stuff in there. Do you use those? I mean, they're so simple, and it is just
really
a shape,
simple.
but they just make your spreadsheets look awesome. Especially if you do a nice summary page with buttons with links and stuff like that. People are like, whoa, this person is the business, and all you've done is drawn a few shapes.
I think
I've definitely had that before.
Sometimes it makes them look a little bit more like an Access database. You'll find if you've ever used an Access database, they have kind of buttons that you click and it takes you to different parts. And you can sort of set up Excel like that. You could even put buttons on your summary page, to jump to different things and stuff like that. You can really make spreadsheets look really nice and really designed very well. Yeah,
big time. I mean, I've seen spreadsheets in the past that have got so many tabs that every single one is like a tiny little dot on the bottom row there, or you have to scroll forever to get to the right tab. So that's when things like hyperlinking to individual tabs or even individual cells, if you've got 10, 20, 30,000 rows of data, can just be a huge time saver.
100%. You could do like a table of contents page. It's sort of like, again, if you've got, as Adam said, I've seen people who have like 200 tabs at the bottom. It's just ridiculous trying to navigate through that. But if you have like a sheet at the beginning, which is almost like a table of contents where you list out the different links so that it's just simple to jump to the particular spreadsheet that you need to get to.
Yeah, big time. Great. Okay, no more questions in, so we'll probably leave it there. We've just tipped the hour, so thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. And we'll get a recording of this up on the website as normal, and I'll send that out to you in the next day or two.
Wonderful. Did you all learn something? That's what I know. Did you all learn at least one new thing? That's what I want to know.
I did.
Because then I'll feel like my job is done.
Yeah, no, we got a few nice comments already, so thanks, Deb.
Wonderful.
Great hacks and tips as always. Locking, protecting, you keep those spreadsheets locked. Great, thanks guys. Have a brilliant morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are in the world. And yeah, we'll see you next month. What are we doing next month, Debs? Do you know?
Oh God, I can't remember now. So you put me on the spot here. I can't remember. I can find out what we're doing next month.
I should probably know. We're doing what if analysis.
That's it.
What we're
That's
doing.
what we're doing. We're doing what if analysis.
That's going to be a real good one, actually. If you've not used, again, those things are sort of simpler to use than you think, and they're really powerful functions once you get your head around them. So, yeah, that's next month. That's May. So yeah, we'll get emails out about that as well to all members, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.